What's up, gatekeepers, and welcome back to another episode of the Mental Training Revolution. Today, I'm actually going to give you some reflections on a 22-day trip that I just took to Thailand. And so, a big reason that I wanted to go on this trip was one, a big part of our curriculum, of course, is the integral approach, right? So we take things from Western psychology, but also combining it with Eastern philosophy ways of training the mind. So one of the big reasons I wanted to go to Thailand was, of course, to talk to monks, to talk to different philosophical and spiritual backgrounds on how they train the mind and essentially increase well-being and have less suffering. And so having personal questions, one-on-one answers was super beneficial for me, and of course that we can implement into our mental training curriculum. And so basically what this podcast is going to be is kind of my reflections and the biggest things that I learned on this trip, and of course the biggest things that you learn from traveling in general, that you can learn from this podcast so you don't have to take a trip to Thailand yourself to learn them. So my goal is to help you skip steps in what I learned through the traveling process and building different perspectives. But of course, Thailand was absolutely unbelievable. When I was there, one of my biggest thoughts was like, I don't know how more people don't want to come to this place. So if you are into traveling, Thailand should be number one on your list, because that was the most beautiful place I've ever been, the most comforting and highest states of happiness that I would say that I've ever been as well. And so we're going to get into all of that. But the first big thing that Thailand taught me, of course, was perspective. So obviously going all the way around the world, so it's completely flipped the times there. So right now, I'm recording this and it's 3 p.m. and so that means it's 3 a.m. in Thailand. So it's the complete opposite side of the world. And so what this means, of course, is that we're going to have people that live completely different lives than us. Okay, and just simply seeing this and knowing this puts a lot of the stuff we get worked up about in our daily lives and realize how much it doesn't matter at all. And for simple examples like the way we view the world, or what we think is true, what we think is not true, or what we believe in. There's people that have no idea even your concept or your idea of how the world works. They have a completely different worldview. And just knowing that people have a completely different worldview gives a lot less of certainty with ours, and which is what we want. We don't want to become attached to the way we view the world or what we think is right and wrong, because of course this is going to hinder our growth. So growth is essentially how fast you can admit error. Let me repeat that. Growth is essentially how fast you can admit error. So it's proving our previous self wrong. So if we hold on to previous forms of thought or ways of thinking or what we think works, that's going to stun our growth, right? And so that's part of our curriculum that we've talked about so many times in this podcast. Ignorance is a big, big deal, and ignorance hinders our growth because we get attached to what we think is right and wrong. And so building these perspectives is building our worldview, because it's breaking down all those views of the world that we think are right. And so, again, I'd like to reiterate, truth is like the North Star, okay? There's two ways that you can truly find what truth is, and that's one, you die, right? Because if you're dead, then you actually know what the world's about and what's going on. And then two is enlightenment. And both the afterlife and enlightenment are extremely probable, but I have no say in talking about it, of course, because I'm not dead and I'm not enlightened. So I'm not going to go into those, and I can't say for sure that they're true or that they're real, but it's probable and it's a possibility. So those are things that you have to consider. But back to how truth is the North Star, we can move towards the North Star. Okay, so we can move towards truth. We can be more right and less wrong. We can move in a direction, but we're never going to find that full truth, which is why we can never get attached to the way we view things. And just know that anything that you're attached to right now is hindering your growth. And so never listen to anyone blindly. Never listen to me blindly. Don't ever listen to anything I say blindly. Always self-investigate for yourself. Try out the mental training tools. And if they work, which they have for so many people, then of course that's how you find closer to that quote-unquote North Star. And so hopefully that gives you a background on why it's so important to build different perspectives. But some of the perspectives that I built, one that I noticed, so I've been to Europe before, so I've traveled out of the country before, and it was a Europe trip similar to the Thailand one that I went on, but obviously in a different area. And Europe had a lot of beggars, so there was a lot of people on the streets begging for money, and of course this is going to happen no matter where you go in the world. Thailand had very few, and they're a developing country, so their economy also isn't the greatest. So they don't have a lot of money. And I thought that was a crazy correlation, is that there was very, very few people asking for money. There was very little beggars compared to Europe, who has the economy is much more stable, has a lot more money than Thailand. But there was more beggars, and in America there's more beggars. And America is the easiest system to work up in terms of economy and making money. And so that was the first thing I noticed that was like, this is interesting, because in America this would not fly. If people in America right now had the money people had in Thailand, everyone would be beggars. And so that was the biggest thing I saw, is that everyone's extremely hardworking and no one gave up. No one gave up, started begging. They continued to trust the journey and trust the process. And so that was a very eye-opening thing that I saw in Thailand. That was very reassuring for me. And I think a lot of that has to do with their mentality and their mindset. So they were some of the nicest and happiest people that I've ever met. And I could only say like a few words to them because the language barrier was so bad. But they still were extremely happy. They were extremely nice. There was not a single person that I ran into that was, not having a good day or not in a good mood or any sorts of things. So of course, this correlates with everything we talk about at the Mental Training Revolution. Their external environment isn't great, or quote unquote like we see in America, yet they still were extremely happy. Their well-being was very, very high. And again, what's the point of life if you don't enjoy it in the first place? And so to me, what that shows is they're very strong within. They have a great sense of well-being within, how they think, how they intentionally respond to their thinking, things of that nature is very, very strong compared to what we have here. And that's really what the world is still missing, is that ability to be okay with no matter what's going on around us, because everything around us is getting easier. Technology is getting better. Everything we do is getting faster. Traveling is getting faster. Using our computers is getting faster. Everything's becoming more efficient with AI. So it's like, what is the world still missing? And just because something's getting easier doesn't mean it's going to make you more happy. Just because you can go through your phone faster or get your work done faster on Google Sheets or any type of AI building machine right now, that doesn't mean it's going to make you happy. And that's really what the world is still missing, is realizing and breaking down these illusions that we have that's keeping us from this happiness. And so to backtrack where I was going with this, it's proof in Thailand. It was proof to me that well-being does come from within, because they had nothing externally compared to what we have in America, and they were way happier than the people we have here. So that was truly eye-opening to me, and it reinforced my idea that well-being comes from within, not the outside world. So that was very reassuring for me. Of course, the last thing I learned from this trip, and the biggest thing that I wanted to focus on going into it, was being as present as I possibly could, right? Because whenever you have these trips, you're always trying to maximize the moment, maximize the trip, trying to have the best possible time. And really, you can have no regrets in the trip, and this goes for life in general, if you're present. Because if you were fully there the entire time, what could you possibly regret? If your mind wasn't in a different place and you were where you were, you have nothing to regret. That's really your only job. And if that's your only job on vacation, that's got to be your only job when you're not on vacation. And that was another huge thing I learned. You got to treat every day like it's a vacation. Okay, and so what I mean by this is you don't skip work or you stop working, but that approach to the day, trying to maximize the day, and the solution to that, of course, is being as present as you can be. You have to take that approach every single day, not just on vacations. And so that gets us away from, wasting days or having mindless days. So when we're not aware or just constantly on autopilot doing the same things each day, of course we're not growing at that point. And so when I say treat every day like vacation, it doesn't mean stop working, but have that same intentional approach and attitude of trying to maximize yourself and trying to maximize your day for growth. And it's going to get you so far in life. And so the biggest thing I learned is I'm not going to stop doing my daily non-negotiables. I'm not going to stop meditating. I'm not going to stop being physically active and working out. I'm not going to stop reading. I'm not going to stop creating, because those are essential to my days and being fully present, and of course my happiness. And so that was the biggest thing I learned is treat every day like a vacation. Every day is like a vacation that way in terms of your intentional approach to maximize what you're doing. And so, of course, the solution to that intentional approach to maximizing what you're doing is being present, right? If we're fully here, if we're fully aware, there's nothing we could possibly regret because you were there, you were fully there. And the last thing I'll end with, gatekeepers, is where does all growth lie? All growth lies in the present. So the more fully present you are on a scale of 0 to 10, if you're on a 10, so basically you're 100% mindful, you know exactly what's going on around you and what's inside your brain, then you have a scale of 1 to 10, 10 on growth potential or growth opportunity. Because if our mind's in a different place, our time-traveling brain, as I like to call it, then we're not going to be able to grow because we're not here now and we can't be intentional with what we're doing. And so again, that's the biggest reason why the solution of being present is the most maximized self we can have, and the no regrets that we can have, is because that's where all growth lies. And of course, growth is the number one indicator to our well-being, because if we know if we're growing ourselves, we're moving towards that best self. And of course, just like truth, our best self, or that version of our best self, is a North Star. We're never going to fully get there. But that's also liberating, because then there's no limits to that best self. So we always have that striving, we always have that growth, and we always have that improvement. And so when we're fully there and fully focused on that growth, it's just crazy how much you gatekeepers can grow and how much you can do in just 1 year's time, looking back at your previous self a year ago, how much can change and how much better you are for yourself and for the others around you. And of course, your happiness and well-being. And when I look back at myself, a year ago, that's the crazy approach that I see. And the difference is that focus on the present moment, because that's where growth lies. And so that's why my growth just went through the roof, because the only place you can grow is here and now. And of course, to sum it up, our mental training tools is building your capacity to be here, and the higher that capacity, the higher your growth. And so that's how it all kind of intertwines. But the biggest thing that traveling does for you gatekeepers is of course building perspective. Remember that people live completely differently than you all across the world. They think completely differently than you. They see the world completely differently than you. So don't be attached to your worldviews. Don't be attached to your beliefs, because that hinders your growth. You're not willing to admit that you're possibly wrong, or that there's other ways to think about the world. And so, of course, you got number one, perspective, okay? And number two is that Thailand didn't have a lot of beggars. No one gave up, and their external environment was not the greatest like we have in America. Yet America has less happy people. So again, that reinforced my concept of that freedom and well-being comes from within, not the external environment. And then, of course, what I talked about, being present is where all growth lies, so you have no regrets, and you want to treat every day like a vacation in terms of that intentional approach. Let's maximize my time here. That's the type of intentional approach you want to have on every day. So when I say every day is a vacation, that doesn't mean you stop working. That's not what I tried to use, but hopefully that analogy made sense. And then the last thing I'm going to cover, gatekeepers, is going back to the monks, is one of the biggest things that was part of his presentation was not dwelling. Okay, don't dwell. He probably said that like 20 times. And I wanted to reiterate why not dwelling is one of the biggest solutions to what's causing you struggle and suffering, whether you're an athlete or a non-athlete. So an example in sports of what dwelling is, say you miss a shot and you're constantly reiterating about that missed shot or about that mistake. That's dwelling on what happened in the past. And of course, our capacity to be here now, to be present, allows us to let go of anything that's in the future or the past. But the reason dwelling is so bad for us is because it blocks energy. And of course, everything takes energy. Everything's a transaction of energy. And when we're holding on to something from the past, that's blocking the energy that can allow us to be present. And again, the reason we want to stop those blockages of energy that are stopping us from being here now is because, again, all growth lies in the present moment. So your capacity to be here now is your capacity to grow. And so the biggest thing, gatekeepers, is knowing that dwelling is blocking energy. And the energy it's blocking is your capacity to be here now. And your capacity to be here now is your ability to grow. And so I know that's so much, but hopefully if you're not driving and listening to this, you can take down some notes. But not dwelling, learning to let go. And I know that's way harder said than done. It's much harder said than done to let go. How does one let go when people say that? And to simplify how to let go, and we can go much into deeper detail in later podcasts, but to simplify what letting go is, gatekeepers, is essentially just being here now. Because remember, the only thing that's real is this moment. Okay? Thoughts about the past, those are just present moment thoughts. Thoughts about the future, those are just present moment thoughts. It's a simulation. It's like a VR headset. That's what our brain is doing majority of our day. Our time traveling brain, that's a simulation, right? That's the same thing as you putting on a VR headset and playing a video game. So it's not real. Thoughts aren't real. But the only thing that is real is this moment right now. And the reality is that's where growth is. And so that's essentially what not dwelling is, and that's how you let go, is you build that capacity to be here now. And so we have tons of mental training tools on how to do that. I would start with concentration gatekeepers. So find a podcast episode on our mental training revolution that deals with concentration, because concentration is the battery pack to our mindfulness. So again, mindfulness is the awareness of the thoughts that we have inside us. Okay, and you need to balance this with concentration, because concentration allows you to have a bigger battery pack for that mindfulness. So if you don't have a lot of concentration but you have a lot of mindfulness, right, you're going to have a very small battery pack with so much mindfulness potential. But of course, if you have too much concentration and no mindfulness, then you're not filling up that battery pack. And I know it's hard for me to explain if you're listening to this and I'm not drawing it on a whiteboard, but we have tons of speeches too where you can watch the visual demonstration of that. But start with concentration gatekeepers to all in all learn how to be here now more, and of course grow more. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Mental Training Revolution Gatekeepers. Remember, put Thailand as number one on your bucket list. And of course, building perspectives is extremely important for your growth, to let go of your worldviews, and of course to learn how to be here now, because we want to make every day a vacation day, that intentional approach to maximize our days. And we do that by being here now, because that's how we grow. And again, I know I'm repeating myself a lot, but I'm trying to ingrain this in your brain so you're ready to respond to that mind that's the doubting mind, or the person that's trying to bring you down. You have all these things to come back with to intentionally respond, and of course increase your well-being. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, Gatekeepers, and of course stay tuned, be ready for the next one, and maybe make a trip to Thailand. Peace.